have experienced a gracious welcome and much friendship. The warmth of this hospitality has come to us from a long line of people, beginning with the President of the Republic, the government and city officials, and extending to pastors and the people of Finland. In the future, the words Finland and Helsinki will be synonyms for Christian grace.
Helsinki, city of Christian grace, city of Lutherans welcoming Lutherans, city of Olympic Games, city between East and West. We came to Helsinki by the thousands from the uttermost parts of the earth, from the nearly 40 different countries on all continents where the Lutheran Church has grown into the largest single Protestant denomination. 3/4 of the world's 76 million Lutherans are part of this federation, and we came to represent them, to listen, to sing, to plan for them. We came to Helsinki, to Senate Square, each of us with a common viewpoint as Lutherans, each with his own viewpoint, influenced by geography, history, politics, education, race, language, tradition. We gathered at the famous landmark of beautiful Helsinki, the great Lutheran Cathedral. To the streets of Helsinki we came. We came to march. The chosen shepherds led the flock. Many were veterans of 3 earlier assemblies. They had marched like this before on the streets of Minneapolis, Lund, Hanover. Those who marched were the chosen delegates, official visitors, youth representatives, special guests from other confessional groups, and the international staff. All had come to Helsinki, to the cathedral. Congregating together there were the well-known and the unknown. Many were tourists who came just because they were interested or curious. Brothers in the same Lutheran family. And this overcame differences, whether of skin color, or accent of speech, or style of dress, or station in life. They would remember this procession. They would talk about this in Geneva, in Caracas, in Budapest, in Pittsburgh. A new chapter in church history was about to be written. We began this first day, and each day, with worship. The viewpoints of the Lutheran world were merged for the moment in a single act of common worship. Those who couldn't find seats in the cathedral watched on television and were joined by millions in their homes throughout Europe. Even here, protocol was respected. The President of the Republic arrived. Urho Kekkonen is the chief of state in Lutheran Finland, where there is no church-state separation. Later in his greeting, he wished the delegates God's blessing. What are your thoughts as you worship here, as you sing and listen and pray? What are you thinking of, you bishops and businessmen? What do the words of the liturgy mean in your language today? From Africa, what viewpoint did you bring? From India, what are your hopes and dreams? From behind the wall, what do you pray for? What message is preached today from the Lutheran pulpit? How do you read the theme of this assembly, that theme in the words, Christ today? What does it say in Germany, the Soviet Union, Sweden, America, Japan, Argentina? Christ today. What does it mean in principle, in practice? The delegates get acquainted. Do you have your assignments? Are you ready to think in global terms? At the university auditorium, each delegate has his seat and a translation device. Listen carefully and report back to those at home. Instantaneous interpretation of every word spoken is yours in any of 4 languages. You're lost without the right documents. Study reports, theological papers were prepared in advance, and hundreds of thousands of words more were printed during the meeting. Every word translated 3 times. It was impossible to read it all. Bishop Manickam of India gave his viewpoint as a vice president. At Geneva headquarters, General Secretary Dr. Kurt Schmidt-Clausen and his staff had prepared for these sessions. He worked closely with Dr. Franklin Clark Fry of New York, president since 1957. Dr. Fry addressed the delegates from his viewpoint as their president.
One benefit from an assembly like this is that every one of us can listen and take heart at ever new evidences of the vitality of the gospel in its adaptableness in the midst of the rapidly and often bewilderingly shifting scene of modern society, often in resilience under attack, with convictions gaining greater depth and courage sublimer heights as believers are hard-pressed.
The heart of the meeting was perhaps behind doors like this. Bishop Hans Lilje of Hanover, Germany, coordinated the discussion groups. Each area of the Federation's work was examined, explored, discussed. Delegates also pondered deep theological issues. All suggestions were recorded, questions were raised, reactions registered. The almost impossible task of distilling a consensus from the discussion groups was given to Bishop Lilje's committee. The main issue was, how do you restate today the age-old Lutheran doctrine of justification by faith? Afterwards, we asked Bishop Lilje for his views.
Now, I think it was an excellent idea to choose for the main theme of the 4th Assembly of the Lutheran World Federation the theme of justification by faith. The idea was to state anew what justification, this central theme of Lutheran doctrine, means in our days. And that was expressed primarily in the final wording of the theme, Christ today. Of course, this did not mean that we should try to borrow from the language of modern man. That would just have been a trick. But we felt it our task to face the modern situation, the scientific mind, the world we live in. Now, most people know that there were tensions within the assembly in trying to express this properly. We must not be afraid of stating this, because to my mind the fact that there were various competing views indicates, in the first place, that we are really after the truth and not after an easy way of building bridges between different views, and that at the same time there is freedom in our church, but that we have to express it again and again in new terms. And I would like to assure everyone that the substance of this biblical concept, that God accepts man through Jesus Christ, was maintained, and this essence stood and will stand forever.
The Vatican sent official Roman Catholic observers, Professor Blazer of Germany, and Father Witte of Rome. This was the first time a single denomination had been so recognized by the papacy.
In diesem Austausch von
The press was interested, and a press conference was held. Catholic viewpoints were translated from the German.
zwischen dem lutherischen Weltbund und der katholischen Kirche sichtbar zum Ausdruck gebracht.
Through this exchange between observers and visitors, good connections between the two faiths should be shown clearly.
Reporters also asked for the viewpoint of one of the Lutheran observers who had been at Rome, Professor George Lindbeck of Yale.
As a Lutheran, I might say that in many respects, I've been rather discouraged when I compare the Vatican Council, the first session of the Second Vatican Council, to the Lutheran World Assembly. And the reason for my discouragement is that we simply don't have enough time here in Helsinki. I'm sure that if we had enough time, the kind of disagreements between different groups within our own assembly that was asked about would emerge. But in such a short time, we cannot discuss things as completely and as thoroughly as the bishops at Rome were able to do.
The delegates were making decisions to continue conversations with Roman Catholics and other confessional groups, Protestant and Orthodox. The Assembly voted to establish a foundation for interconfessional research in Strasbourg, France. They admitted to membership 11 new churches, including several in the Soviet Union and in Africa. They acted on a host of resolutions and budgetary matters. The business of the plenary sessions was prepared for and recorded by a staff and skillfully expedited through the parliamentary process by President Fry. Leaders were elected to serve until the next assembly. They re-elected Treasurer Dr. Weber of Germany. He's congratulated by Dr. Fry and thanked for his past service. He joins the executive committee of 20 top Lutheran leaders who will be responsible for LWF affairs for the next 5 years. Among them are bishops and lay leaders from Germany, India, Tanganyika, America, Finland, and Poland. The executive committee will meet every year in various places of the world. President Schutz from America, Bishop Aala of South Africa, Berkeley of Norway, Dietz Felbinger of Germany, Bo Yertz of Sweden, President Jung of France, Bishop Krumacher of East Germany. Then came the balloting for president. We watched Dr. Frederick A. Schutz of Minneapolis, as he had been nominated. Until the last day, it was anyone's guess who would be chosen to succeed Dr. Fry. Almost everyone, including Dr. Schutz, was sure it wouldn't be another American. Nevertheless, he was universally admired, and the younger churches of Asia and Africa considered him their special friend and champion. So he was persuaded to accept if elected.
It's my place and joy to declare as president of the Lutheran World Federation for the next period my colleague, Dr. Frederick A. Schutz, president of the American Lutheran Church in the United States and Canada. Dr. Schutz is one of the real veterans and pioneers and foundation layers of the Lutheran World Federation, and of course been a very valuable member of executive committee. I suggest you applaud him again and then listen to him.
Mr. President and members of the Assembly, let me first of all express my very hearty thanks for the warm welcome extended by Dr. Fry. Despite this warm welcome, it is with some hesitance that I stand here and recognize the call that is involved in your election. In the presence of this roster of distinguished men, you know why I hesitate. And yet, if I were to allow this hesitance to dictate action, then I would belie the theme about which we have gathered this week. If Christ is in today, and every today that we will meet in the future, then I trust that he will supply the kind of strength and the kind of wisdom that may be needed as each task may be presented. And in that confidence that his grace will be sufficient and that your prayers will support me, I accept your election.
The real work of Lutherans together in the world today was not being done in Helsinki, but only reflected there, examined there, explained there. The Assembly, with its many reports, gave us an insight, a viewpoint on the far-flung concerns and activities of world service and world mission. We get a composite picture through the words of those who know it best. We begin in the exhibit with Dr. Bruno Mitzelfeld, Director of the Department of Lutheran World Service. Dr. Fry adds pertinent comments. Dr. Paul Empey, Director of the National Lutheran Council, Lutheran World Action, and Chairman of the World Service Commission. Dr. Arne Servik, Director of Lutheran World Mission, with headquarters in Geneva. Pastor Donald Truitt, Secretary of the Department of World Missions Cooperation of the National Lutheran Council. Bishop Stefano Moschi of the Lutheran Church of Northern Tanganyika and a member of the Commission on World Mission. And Dr. Stuart Herman, Seminary President, former LWF Affairs Secretary of the National Lutheran Council.
This panel before us illustrates the millions of people who find themselves in utter unspeakable privation compared with the affluent society in which many of us are privileged to live. And as the population growth continues, we will find that their needs will increase. And as we look at this mass of humanity, we are tempted to generalize and forget that instead of a meaningless anonymity of man, there stands behind each one of those people an individual, a child, a mother, a father who needs our help and our care as we extend to him our love in Christ.
In an age of uprooting of peoples, more than 100,000 have seen and felt the active compassion of Christ as our world service has assisted them to new homes overseas. Homes not only for their bodies, but for their souls. Symbolically, the 1 millionth migrant moved by the Intergovernmental Committee for European Migration, and the 250,000th refugee to go to far-off Australia were among those moved by this federation.
Our century has been named the Refugee Century, and although strenuous efforts have been made also by the churches in order to assist the millions of people who have been deprived of their homes, yet many more millions are still homeless today. And so the challenge surely goes out to us. I was homeless, the Lord said, and you took me in. And these are some of the people whose problem can be solved. Here are some young refugee boys with longing eyes looking at a ship going overseas. Here are some without adequate clothing. Lutheran World Relief can give them the clothing they need. Here are some in overcrowded housing conditions, unworthy of human beings. Christian compassion can give them new housing. And in this way, we recognize that these people appeal to our humanity, but our response will test our Christianity.
If it be true that man's extremity is God's opportunity, then our perilous times must be overflowing with situations to which his restoring and reconciling power may be brought by those in whom he dwells. The years ahead will be a time of testing for the LWF, as indeed for all Christians. For we face a world which has become cynical about our efforts to give it everything but that through which alone we can share our Christ, ourselves.
And what may our response be? Surely it is this, that in response to the love which Christ has shown us, we should show love to our fellow men. Where he has fed the hungry, we are privileged today to give those who are suffering from hunger the necessary food. Where they are homeless, through the gifts which you can provide, housing can be given to those who have nowhere where they might live. Clothing, medical aid, these are the things through which a love which is Christian in character and in motivation can find its true expression in the world today.
There are those who say that there is no such thing as a distinctively Christian service, that there is only service done by Christians. Others say that the distinction is in the motive, that Christian service should always be disinterested, in the sense that there is no ulterior motive save love alone.
The giving of relief is important in emergency situations, but we must also plan for the future so that those whom we assist do not become too dependent on the aid we give. And therefore we must plan in industry, in agriculture, and many other phases of modern life. We work together with governments and United Nations agencies by pinpointing certain pilot projects in order that we may prove that these things can be achieved even in developing countries. Particularly important are self-help projects in vocational training, in blacksmith, and many other phases of life. And here particular is a picture which will be of interest in handicraft, a self-help project of our Hong Kong service. And you will see that they are making vestments for the church. And this is symbolic of the work which we try to do on your behalf.
Since the Second World War, no less than 150 million people throughout the continent of Africa have become independent. They have accordingly trained men and even women soldiers to fight and to die for freedom, but even more preferably to live and to rejoice for a precious bought freedom and independence. This is true not only of the continent of Africa, but of India and Asia as well, where an additional 800 million have become independent since 1950.
The churches in these countries, to meet their increasing obligations in a constantly more complex and demanding situation, require the help of their brethren in better-to-do lands. The Asian and African churches have their representatives among us. They are part of us here. Learn to know them and their work.
It is to such a world and humanity alienated from Christ that Lutheran World Action, through its World Mission Program, seeks to minister. Innumerable are the classes which are held, such as this, where people have had their first taste of reading and learning to write, taught by someone who has perhaps taught herself.
Just quite recently, we dedicated the Luther House in Dar es Salaam.
A Luther house?
Luther House in Dar es Salaam.
What sort of a building is this?
It is a building for social activities and also offices, and where people, they can come together and discuss problems. And there are offices also for the Lutheran Church in Tanganyika. And also this new project in Moshop Hospital, Kilimanjaro Medical Christian Center. And some projects are coming up, that is agriculture school in Karatu, and also trade school in Makumira, and trade school in Pare.
Can you tell us about this agricultural school and the trade school and what they will mean to your people?
Well, in that area where we want to have this trade agriculture school, people are very backward. They don't know good methods of cultivating. Therefore, we want to help these people. And, the church should give them not only gospel, but also something to help them.
In a day when the isolation of churches from one another is hopelessly outdated, left behind, if only we have eyes to see it, by the rapid currents of history. The Lutheran World Federation has enabled stronger churches to undergird the weak. It has saved minority churches from the defeatism of seeming to stand alone. In it, we must overleap, as is so sorely needed, the barriers between East and West, and we are establishing a Christian bond of peace.
Latin American Lutheran churches have never and do not now simply look to the Lutheran World Federation for interchurch aid, but for full participation in the rich variety of ecumenical life and work. I am sure that this applies not only to Latin America, but also to Asia and Africa as well.
With guests from Ethiopia to tell about the radio project, here is Dr. Philip Johnson.
I'd like to introduce to you two very distinguished gentlemen who are here in Helsinki attending the Lutheran World Federation Assembly. His Excellency Otto Emanuel Abraham, President of the Board of Communications of the Ethiopian government, and Dr. Sigurd Aski, who is the Director of the Lutheran World Federation Broadcasting Service. And Your Excellency, how does this look to you?
Well, for me, it's most significant that Ethiopia, which had been struggling to keep up her Christian faith, has now become a beacon of light to spread the gospel to the areas around Ethiopia.
Just how far is this beacon of light shining, Dr. Aski? What kind of equipment are you using for it?
With the two 100 kilowatt shortwave transmitters, RVUG is able to reach the whole of Africa's 240 million people, the 100 million Arabic-speaking people, and also a large part of Asia. Were St. Paul alive today, he would speak to more people on this radio station than he did during his entire lifetime. And not only ordinary people who read papers and see television, but people who have no other access to listening to a Christian message.
Well, my government is very happy to have this radio station in Addis Ababa. It's by far the largest station we have in the country now. And in fact, already the Lutheran radio station helped us very much during the African Summit Conference. And I would here like to express our gratitude for the coverage of news that was sent to the West during those crucial days for Africa.
New dimensions, putting to shame the chronically small thinking of our past, although still falling short of matching the expanding horizons all around us or the opportunities ahead, have been stretched out for all of our churches by the voice of the gospel radio station. All of them have been exhilarated by the boldness of its conception and the massive scale on which it was planned, lifting us to an exciting new plateau in our Lutheran witness to Christ. Can anyone estimate what that is worth?
And can anyone estimate what just being here in Helsinki at this assembly is worth? Just realizing that we are a part of it and share in its work through our gifts and our prayers. Its dimension can be felt in those moments when we are shoulder to shoulder with our Christian brothers and sisters from the uttermost parts of the earth, here to sing the same Lutheran hymns and pray in a Pentecost of foreign tongues our Lord's Prayer. The reality of our Helsinki experience helps us enlarge our viewpoint. And as we began at the altar here in this city that bridges the tensions of this world, so in leaving, we rise to worship and praise Him who was and is and ever shall be Christ today, whose word and sacraments unite us. Christ today, who justifies us. Christ today, whose love determines our viewpoint.